All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tear apart the very idea of modern power. You might want to forget everything you think you know about what makes a nation strong, because based on the work of Selahattin Koyuncu, we're about to dive into the new, often invisible rules of the game in the 21st century.
So, let's just kick things off with a big question. What actually makes a nation powerful these days? I mean, the answer used to be pretty simple, right? It was all about the size of your army. But if you still think that, well, you're living in the last century. The rulebook has been completely torn up.
You see, the whole foundation of power has radically shifted. It's no longer just about physical might, armies, borders, and bullets. Now the real influence is wielded through algorithms, through global networks, and through massive amounts of data. It's a much quieter, way more subtle form of power, and you could argue it's far, far more potent.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this new world, we've got to go back to a classic idea, one that splits strategy into two fundamental phases.
You've probably heard of Machiavelli, right? The brilliant and, pretty controversial strategist. He argued that any effective leader has to be both a lion and a fox. You have to be fearsome, but you also have to be cunning. This idea is the perfect introduction to the two core types of power that states are still using today.
So on one side, you have the lion's hard power. Think of this as the loud, in-your-face stuff: military strikes, cyber attacks, drones, basically anything that breaks things and forces an outcome. But then, on the other side, you've got the fox's soft power. This is the shadow game. This is the subtle art of persuasion, of shaping how people think, through media, propaganda, and some pretty sophisticated psychological operations. And another legend, Sun Tzu, he basically built his entire philosophy around being the fox. He famously argued that the greatest victory is one that requires no battle at all. It's about winning in the minds of your rivals long before any shots are ever fired.
Want to see how this plays out in the real world? Look no further than Russia's annexation of Crimea back in 2014. This was an absolute masterclass in hybrid warfare. It wasn't just a military move, it was a perfectly synchronized dance. First, the lion strikes. Special forces, these so-called little green men, pop up and seize key locations. But at the exact same time, the fox gets to work, unleashing this massive propaganda and disinformation campaign to justify it all and sow total confusion. The result? A hybrid victory, all done by blending hard and soft power so seamlessly.
But here's the thing. Just having a lion and a fox in your corner, it's not enough. Not even close. To really project power in today's world, a state needs a seriously robust engine room and a whole cast of players.
There's that famous line from the military theorist Karl von Clausewitz, right? War is merely the continuation of politics by other means. And he totally nailed it. They're not separate things, they're just two sides of the same coin. And to play that game well, a state needs a powerful infrastructure humming along behind the scenes.
At the end of the day, a nation's power is really built on three huge pillars. First, you need a stable financial engine, because you got to pay for all this. Second, you need a credible defense, a military that can deter your rivals and act when needed. And third, you need the diplomatic skill to build alliances and get the rest of the world to see things your way. Without all three, even the smartest lion or fox is going to stumble. And if you want a perfect modern example of this in action, just look at China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's using enormous financial investment, that first pillar, to build infrastructure all over the world. This creates economic dependencies and gives them potential access to strategic ports and locations, all while they frame it as peaceful global cooperation. It's pure Sun Tzu, played out on a global economic chessboard. And get this, the game isn't just played by governments anymore. It's way bigger than that. Think of it like a giant orchestra. Sure, you've got your official state actors, the diplomats and ministries, but you've also got huge corporations, intelligence agencies, special forces, and even private mercenary groups, all playing their part to advance a nation's strategy.
History gives us a jaw-dropping example of this. The British East India Company. This wasn't just a business. It was a corporation that had its own army, its own government, its own economic system. It basically conquered an entire subcontinent for the British Crown. That just shows you how incredibly potent non-state power can be when it's aligned with national interests.
So all of this blending of hard and soft, of money and military, of public and private actors, it actually has a name. Modern strategists call it smart power. It's a concept from Joseph Nye. And it's simply the art of intelligently combining all the tools in your toolbox, coercion and persuasion, to get what you want.
Okay, so when you combine all these tools, you start to see nations operating in this really fascinating and frankly, kind of scary space, what experts call the gray zone.
And a huge tactic inside this gray zone is the proxy war. So what's that? Basically, it's when big powers get other people to fight their battles for them. They fund them, they arm them, they advise them. Why? Because it lets them compete for influence while avoiding the absolutely catastrophic costs and risks of a direct head-to-head fight.
The Cold War was like the golden age of proxy wars, right? It was the textbook example. From the jungles of Vietnam, where the Soviets and Chinese backed the North against the U.S. backed South, to the mountains of Afghanistan, where the U.S. armed the Mujahideen against the Soviets, the two superpowers never fired a shot at each other directly, but they turned local conflicts into brutal global battlegrounds.
But fast forward to today, and these conflicts have gotten insanely complex. I mean, just look at the Syrian civil war. It's a chaotic modern laboratory for this stuff. You have the US, Russia, and Iran all operating on the same battlefield, but they're backing different groups and using this dizzying array of tools, everything from smart bombs and mercenaries to cultural ties and UN vetoes, all at the same time.
So when you boil it all down, what's the key takeaway here? It's one word: orchestration. Modern power isn't about having the biggest army or the most money anymore. The real test, the ultimate test of a powerful state, is the ability to conduct this incredibly complex symphony of force, finance, and influence, and to keep all those instruments playing in perfect harmony, especially when a crisis hits.
And all this leaves us with a pretty unsettling final thought. As all these lines keep blurring, between war and peace, between politics and conflict, between a soldier and a civilian, what does the future of power even look like? In a world of constant hybrid threats and endless proxy battles, where is the real battlefield anymore? And maybe more importantly, who are the real soldiers?